All right, we're live. Hello, this is Christian Idealism, and today I have a new guest. His name is Hayden, and he runs a YouTube channel called Gen Z Apologetics. Now, of course, we're around the same age. I'm 19. I'm assuming you're 18. Is that correct?
Yes, I am turning 19 this December.
Okay, so we're around the same age. So we both are good, like in the young ages, obviously. So we're both apologists. So I just want to ask you just a few quick questions before we kind of have a little discussion. So what made you what was your, I guess you can kind of give the short version, but what made you a Christian, or have you always been a Christian?
I grew up in a Christian home, but my faith was very little. I would say I was more of a Christian by name, and over the years, for my Christianity was just do whatever I wanted while I was on earth, and on my deathbed say the sinner's prayer, and then go enjoy heaven. But something went wrong in that plan. I ended up going through depression. I ended up getting suicidal thoughts, and I ended up going through a porn addiction, and I didn't know at that time. I did not know what it was or how I felt. I just know I hated myself and I hated life, and I just wanted to end it. But before I was thinking of actually doing that, my mother recommended I go to a fall fling, which is what our church does. Is like we go to a camp, have fun, talk about Jesus, and the preacher is almost as like he was talking about getting through porn addiction and depression and suicide, and that was everything I was feeling. And that night, because I had nothing, I gave my life to Jesus, and I've been a Christian. I say I've been an actual Christian who gave his life to Jesus for a year and a half.
Okay, so basically, you went into depression, and did you ever have any doubts about your faith, or?
About my faith, I had questions, but when I gave my life to Christ, I've never thought is I've never necessarily doubted, like what Ravi Zacharias says. He says I had questions, but I never actually doubted my relationship with Christ. And I know there's a lot of people who do doubt, which is good, but I've never experienced that kind of doubt now.
Okay. All right. So next question. What got you into apologetics?
I got into apologetics about 2 weeks after I gave my life to Christ. I didn't really know where to go with Christianity. I didn't know where to go. So I ended up stumbling across Billy Graham sermons on YouTube, as everyone does. And then I got a recommended feed in YouTube called somebody named Ravi Zacharias. And so I clicked on it because I thought it'd be another sermon or something to help me. But it was more than that. I was actually taking on objections and questions of Christianity. And I said, this is really cool. And so I started studying these things, but I never stopped. And I've been doing that for about a year and a half, the same amount of time I've been saved.
Okay, so you would say it was Ravi Zacharias that got you into it, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So ever since you've been into apologetics, what has been because there's a lot of topics. Like I can name probably like 5 different ones. So within apologetics, there's different fields we can get into. So you have philosophy of religion, which deals specifically with arguments for and against God. Then you also have philosophy of mind, which deals with questions of the soul. Then you also have New Testament studies, which deals with the history of Jesus and who he was, whether or not the resurrection occurred. You also have ethics, dealing with morality. So there's a lot of different questions, a lot of different concerns within apologetics. It's a big field of study. So what's your topic that you kind of dive into?
I really started off with atheism. I think that's what most people start off with when they go into apologetics, is dealing with atheism. And I still deal with atheism, but really my main topic is Islam. My main topics is like 60% is Islam and 40% is atheism.
Okay, and why Islam?
Um, I was just actually I really don't know why. I was just going on a walk, and I was thinking about all the religions dealing with atheism, and I was thinking, I wonder what Muslims believe. It's because an atheist brought the objection up to me. Well, you believe the same thing as Jews and Muslims, and you say that they're wrong. Why are you right? And I was like, I really don't know what Muslims believe, and I don't want to be disqualified for saying you're right. I don't know what Muslims believe, and so I intended to just learn the basic gist, and so I could use that. But I found the religion not only fascinating, but I noticed that there's a very small number of people who deal with the religion of Islam. So I thought, if nobody else, especially in our generation, is going to deal with it, why not me? I mean, nobody else is going to do it, and I like studying this religion, so I might as well do it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't study Islam, but I do know there are a lot more Muslims than atheists, for example, right? So you shouldn't spend all your time with atheists, obviously. I've had a lot of good conversations with atheists, but I haven't really had any good conversations with Muslims, so I can understand your perspective on kind of a dialogue between them, because there's a lot more Muslims out there than atheists, at least worldwide. So, yeah. All right. So, since you study Islam, and this is not like the test or anything, but what do you think is the biggest issue with Islam? Like, what's your number one objection as of right now, based on what you know about it?
Well, there's a lot of. Hold on. Are you busy? Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot. I think the biggest objection that they will give against Christians is that either the Bible has been corrupted, that is their biggest one, and I think if every Christian learned what the people I've learned Islam from called the Islamic dilemma, they would have to get rid of that argument. And what the Islamic dilemma is the Quran affirms that Allah sent down the Torah and the Gospel. Now, a lot of Muslims will say, yes, we believe that, because that's a part of their 6 articles of faith. That say, yes, we believe that, but we believe man has corrupted it. But if you read through the Quran, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that anywhere. It shows, instead, all of it says is it shows the inspiration and the preservation and the continuing authority, because there's verses like, oh, Jews and Christians, you have no ground to stand upon unless you judge by the gospel. Surah 5, verse 47. So the Quran says, hey, Christians, go to the gospel. Except the gospel thoroughly corrupts the Quran. It calls Muhammad a false prophet. So if the Quran is right, that the gospel and Torah are the authoritative word of God, we have to reject Muhammad. But if the Quran is wrong, and the Torah and the gospel have been corrupted, Islam is false, because it says that they're not corrupted, yet apparently they are, according to Muslims of today. So either road a Muslim goes down, he would have to reject Islam, and that is,
Right.
which is central, because the Bible has been corrupted is their biggest one. Of course, they have others, like Muhammad was the greatest moral man who ever lived, and the Quran has been perfectly preserved. That's probably tied. That one's probably tied with the Bible's been corrupted.
Right. Yeah, I do like that. Now, I wouldn't say that that's probably not the biggest objection I would bring up, but I mean, it's a good point, because I don't know any Muslim scholar that has actually addressed that point. So, Muslims would typically say, oh, well, you just need to read scholars, or they'll bring up their favorite scholar. But when you actually look at the details, you don't actually see any of them address this dilemma, for example. So that's a problem. Obviously, if not even the experts can really provide a solution, then it's an issue. Okay. So, is there anything like any other? Because so based on what I know about Islam, is that it's a doctrine that the Quran has to be perfectly preserved. Like, that's not, it's not just like this side belief. Like, for example, with Christians, they may have inerrancy, for example, but inerrancy is not a doctrine, right? But in Islam, it seems like inerrancy, or not even inerrancy, but like preservation is a doctrine.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So if it's a doctrine, then if there's any changes, if there's any variations or changes in the text that have been changed throughout the years, then Islam is false, because one of the doctrines is false. That's just going by what they say. And when you look into it, you'll find a lot of these variations, and a lot of corruption going on. Now, typically, most Muslims will try to say, oh, well, the Quran is just as reliable as the Gospels. Like, they'll say that, yes, there's variations, but there isn't really any changes in the text. However, there have been a lot of scholars that have pointed out, there's actually I don't know who exactly it was by, but there's this dissertation written by a scholar that basically argues that that the 10 earliest manuscripts that Muslims have, there are clear and obvious variations that do change the meaning of the text, for example. I forgot what it's called, but I'll have to look it up again. But basically, the idea is that when you actually look at the evidence for the original and the earliest manuscripts, there are variations, and you actually literally have like cases where they will cover up those variations. So like they're trying to hide something that was changed. And if that's what occurred, then that's a huge problem, because then you literally have them tampering with the text to try to save this doctrine. So yeah, at least that's kind of what I see. Now,
Yes.
that's one of the other big objections that I would bring up. But
the preservation of the Quran, the story of how the Quran was compiled, is a very interesting story. I'll try and give a very because there's a lot to it. I will try and make it as brief as I can, yet give valuable information. So you have places like in the Hadith, which, for those who do not know, Muslims, they have the Quran. That's their number one book. And 80% of Muslims in the world are Sunni Islam. So they have Hadith, which is like biographies or testimonies of Muhammad. You have Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and then you have stuff like Sunnah Abu Dawood and Jami' at-Tirmidhi and such. And then you have stuff like Sirah literature, like Ibn Asaq and History of At-Tabari. But how the Quran was compiled is Muhammad dies, and by this point, people only have the Quran. There's specific people who have specific parts of the Quran memorized, and nobody else has these parts of the Quran memorized. And after Muhammad dies, there's a mass exodus from Islam. So Abu Bakr, Muhammad's best friend and the first of the rightly guided caliphs, commands a war against those who leave Islam. And there's a lot of people who die in that war who had pieces of the Quran memorized. Those pieces are lost. And specifically, this happened at a battle called the Battle of Yamama. But the people I learned it from, and I'm going to call this myself as Yamama, because I don't like to call it Yamama, because people start making jokes. So pieces of the Quran are lost. And then you have instances like in the Hadith where Aisha, Muhammad's favorite wife, goes into a story about a chapter in the Quran called chapter 33. How over 100 verses of it are missing because they were eaten by a sheep. And yeah, I know that sounds weird, but yeah, she says, and these verses were about stoning adulterers and breastfeeding 5 times for this weird kind of adoption. And Aisha says they're the only copy were eaten by a sheep, coincidentally. And so you have all these variants. So Abu Bakr decides to have Zaynab ibn Thabit create, go out and make a physical copy of the Quran. But there's a problem with that because there's different Qurans throughout all of the Muslim world. You have 3 main Qurans. You have Ibn Masud's Quran, which only has 111 chapters. He thinks that 3 chapters that we have the Quran today shouldn't be in it because they're just prayers, according to him. And then you have another guy named Ubay ibn Ka'b. His Quran had 116 chapters, so his Quran had 2 chapters that is not in the Quran today. And you have Zayn ibn Thabit's Quran, which had 114, which is how many we have in our Quran today.
Right.
So a couple of years later, well, not a couple of years, but you know what I mean, Uthman, the third of the rightly guided caliphs, gets all of these different manuscripts of the Quran, keeps Zayn ibn Thabit's version, and literally burns all the rest. So all those copies of the Quran are gone. So they say, we've only had one Quran. And when really they had all these variants, they just burnt them all. They just burnt and destroyed all the evidence. So if you read that,
Right.
then that argument for Islam, which is perfect preservation, right from the mouth of Muhammad onto the page of the Quran, doesn't work.
Right. And I also want to point out that the Quran that we have today, so like the standard Quran, was actually, that Quran was chosen, I forgot what his name was, but there was like one scholar back in the early 20th century that kind of made a decision like, hey, this is the standard Quran, and that's like the mainstream Quran that you'll see.
1924 in Cairo, Egypt. And that Quran, there's a lot of differences, but that Quran ultimately goes back to Zayn ibn Thabit's Quran. But yes, Muslims haven't had one standard Quran that all of them read until 1924. And even then they don't. You have, like, Muslims in North Africa have a completely different Quran than Muslims, say, in America or
right.
Japan.
And that is extremely detrimental to the claim that the Quran is supposed to be this preserved word, right? Because we there's no evidence that there ever was a Quran that was agreed upon by Muslims throughout its history. Even though that's a doctrine that's taught, like, hey, the Quran is perfectly preserved from God and it's universal, that's actually not true when you look at the history. It turns out there's like multiple different Qurans that have existed in different parts of the world, and each one, it tells a different story and has different meanings in the text. So yeah, it's a problem.
Yes, it is. And by the way, if there's any Muslims in the chat who said, where is he getting this North African Quran from? Shabir Ali has even admitted this recently, that there's variance in the Quran read by people in North Africa versus people in the Middle East.
Right. And this is like not even, these objections aren't even like the biggest, I would say. So there's actually one objection I brought up in my last Q&A session. The biggest objection to Islam that I find the most convincing would be that when you look at the sources that Muslims use, or at least that the Quran uses itself, it's actually copied from Gnostic sources. So those date back to the 2nd century. So if you actually like look at the story, it's literally the same story that's copied from the Gnostics.
Yes.
And if that's true, well, then you literally have plagiarism going on. But you know.
I know what you mean. So Surah 19 in the Arabic is called Surah al-Maryam, or Surah of Mary, or Chapter of Mary, the mother of Jesus. It basically goes through how Jesus was born, and it gets a lot of stories from the infancy Gospel of Thomas from the 2nd century, and there's even places in the Quran where the pagans of Mecca say, Muhammad, you don't really believe these stories, do you? In fact, they say these are nothing but fables of the men of old. Like in Surah 18, you have a story where it talks about a couple of men sleeping in a cave for I think it was 500 years, and then they wake up, and then they wake up 500 years later. That goes back from a old story from I think it's like the 3rd or 5th century of Ephesus.
Right.
And also you have in Surah 18, verse 83 through 86. You have, by the way, that cave one was Surah 18, verse 18, and Surah 18, verses 83 through 86. It talks about a man named Dhul Qarnayn, who most people translate as Alexander the Great. Traveling so far west, he finds the place where the sun literally sets, which is in a pool of muddy water, and there's a tribe of people that live near it.
And it's not supposed to be metaphorical, right?
No, it's literal. It's literal. And
Muhammad believed it, right?
Yes, he did. There's even now most Muslims will go if you Google the Quran, they'll use the Sahih International Translation. It's probably the most unreliable translation ever. If you go through any other translations, Yusuf Ali, Pickthall, Palmer, any of them, they don't. And the difference between them and Sahih International puts in the words "as if" in parentheses.
Right.
Those aren't supposed to be. They're not there in the Arabic. Sahih International changed them. So it makes it Muhammad didn't actually believe it. But there's places in Hadith where Muhammad talks about the sun landing in a pool of muddy water. And that's one of the many scientific problems with Islam.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of scientific problems with it. Yeah, that's one of the bigger ones. But yeah. So. All right. So with this in mind, is there any books you recommend that people read to kind of study Islam? Or
yes, I mean, now I don't know a single Christian who doesn't recommend this book, but if you're going to go into apologetics at all, read the book Tactics by Gregory Kokel. Doesn't matter what field you're going into, that's the number one, because it teaches you how to discuss. Then for Islam specifically, I think the first book on Islam people should read, and it's my personal favorite, is Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by Nabil Qureshi. Because not only does it show you some factual reasons why Christianity has more evidence than Islam, but it teaches you, it goes through the story of a Muslim so you can be empathetic towards your Muslim friends, and you can have a little bit of an idea of what they're thinking when they think about Christianity, like with the Trinity. They think that's another good one. They think we're polytheists, no God but one, also by Nabil Qureshi, and that gives you a side-by-side comparison of what they believe.
right.
It's like gospel versus Sharia, Trinity versus Tawheed, Quran versus Bible, and it goes through all of this. And another good one is that shows you what Muslims believe is Answering Islam by Dr. Norm Geisler and Abdullah Samir. The first third of the book, it just tells you what Muslims believe without refuting them, and then in the second book, the second third, it shows you the problems with what Muslims believe, and the third, it shows why Christianity has better evidence than Islam. So those are the three main books I would recommend about learning Islam.
Right. Okay. I'd also like to point out, I think you would agree with me that when it comes to the Muslim view of Jesus, there are no scholars other than Muslims that accept any variation of a Muslim view of Jesus. So, like, for example, when you look at the Christian view of Jesus, you at least have scholars from the secular side that will affirm certain facts about Jesus. Even if they're not Christians, they're still affirm like basic Christian teachings about Jesus. Whereas with the Muslim side, they don't. It's different, right? It's like, for example,
Yes.
you don't have that many scholars deny the crucifixion or something else. So
Yeah, so the Christian Jesus claimed to be the Messiah. He claimed to be the Son of God, and he claimed to be God incarnate. And Christians also believe he died on the cross for sins and rose from the dead. Muslims reject all of that. Muslims believe that Jesus only claimed to be a prophet. In Surah 5 of the Quran, there's a conversation about between Allah and Jesus. And Allah says, "Did you tell people to take you and your mother as two separate gods besides Allah?" And Jesus says, "Far be it from me. You know what is in my soul. I do not know what is in your soul." So, by that, they think Jesus only claimed to be a Muslim prophet. And they believe that the 12 disciples were Muslims. They don't think Jesus died on the cross. They don't think he was even crucified at all. You have some sects like the Ahmadi sect of Islam. They think Jesus was crucified, but he didn't die on the cross. But the problem with that is Surah 4, verse 157 says he wasn't killed, nor was he crucified. So they're going against the Quran on that one. And what they believe about Jesus, like for eschatology, they believe Jesus will come back, he'll kill the Antichrist and the pigs. It's not really clear who the pigs are. And then he will marry a woman, and he will have at least 2 sons. One of them is named Mohammed. I'm blanking on the other one. Then Jesus will die, and he'll be buried next to Muhammad. And then on the day of resurrection, Allah will resurrect Muhammad and Jesus, and then that conversation will take place. And like you said, the majority of, now of course you do have your outliers of scholars, say Jesus died on the cross. Most scholars say that is one of the most certain facts in ancient history. Bart Ehrman, the skeptic that Muslims love to quote, by the way, they say they like to go to Bart Ehrman because he believes the Gospels aren't reliable. He believes they contradict themselves. But he says he has 11 separate sources for the crucifixion. So if Bart Ehrman is right, then Islam is false. And you have people like Gerhard Luderman and others, skeptics, who say, no, the crucifixion is the most certain fact in history.
Right. So that's another problem. I mean, there's a lot of issues we can get into. There was one documentary, I recommended it last time, but basically it's called Islam Debunked by Exegetical Apologetics. You can check it out. But so yeah, I think that'll be it. Is there anything else you want to discuss real quick, or do you think you still have a lot more studying to do on the other subjects? Because there's a lot of subjects, but I understand that you like to focus on.
Well, in Islam there's a lot of subjects. Like I don't know. So when you ask a Muslim, well, why do you believe Muhammad is a prophet? They'll give you a general group. Some of that is prophecies, of course, except Muhammad, to my knowledge, none of his prophecies came true. If you're going to say one came true, and this is the one Muslims like to go to, one of the parts of the prophecy says that women will be clothed, although they will appear to be naked, and they'll see, today women dress very, very provocatively. Therefore, Muhammad was right, therefore he's a true prophet. Which, I don't want to offend Muslims, but it's kind of sad if that's your only prophecy you can go on.
Yeah, it's pretty weak.
Yeah.
Because I feel like anybody could predict that.
Yeah. And the second one will be Muhammad was the greatest moral example ever. In fact, even the Quran says that. He says, "Oh, you who believe, you have a great example in Muhammad." Except if that's true, I'm really nervous for mankind. Because married a six. In fact, there's a video I saw defending the marriage of Aisha, and I may make a video on that soon. Defending the marriage of Aisha. Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 years old, and the reason he did that is he was in a dream and he saw I think it was a picture of Aisha. So he went to his best friend Abu Bakr, who's the father of Aisha, and said, "I want to marry your daughter." He said, "Muhammad, we're basically brothers." And Muhammad goes, but we're not. So he marries Aisha at 6, and this is where Muslims will come to defense mode, because he doesn't consummate the marriage with Aisha until she's 9 years old. Their main argument will be she reached puberty. That's not true. The hadiths say that she had her dolls with her, which is basically an Arabic metaphor, or an Arabic way of saying she had not reached puberty. She was still premature. And there's other things that Muhammad did. Now, for Aisha, what I think happened was, when Aisha was 6, shortly after their marriage, Aisha got a really bad sickness and all of her hair fell out. She was practically bald. So Muhammad waited until her hair was like down to here in this general region, and then, which took about 3 years, then he consummated the marriage. And you have others, like there's one of his wives was named Zainab. Zainab was was the wife of his adopted son, Zayd ibn Muhammad. Problem with that is Muhammad accidentally was going to visit Zayd, and then he accidentally caught Zainab, who was practically naked for all intents and purposes. And he was murmuring to himself, but he shouted out, "Glory be to Allah! Glory be to Allah, who causes hearts to turn." And so Muhammad's adopted son realized that his adopted father had a thing for his wife. So he said, "Well, Muhammad, I will divorce Zainab for you." And he said to him, No, don't do that. Keep your wife. But Zainab saw the opportunity to move up in the hierarchy, so she divorced him, married Muhammad, and people were making fun of him, which led to the revelation of Surah 33, verse 4, abolishing adoption in the religion of Islam. And a lot of Muslims will say, well, this is inauthentic. The main gist of that story is in the Quran, in Surah 33. By the way, if you want to know the morality of Islam, I highly recommend you read Surah 33. It has a lot of topics, and it's kind of messed up. Another one was this man named, oh crap, what was his name? I know his wife was named Sophia. I think his name was Kanana. This man named Kanana knew where some money was, and Muhammad wanted that money. So Muhammad lit a fire over Kanana's chest to get the information. Kanana ended up dying, but Muhammad got the money. But this woman named Sophia, she was a widow. She had nowhere to go. But Muhammad found her attractive, and he married her. And you have other things, like, this is all just with Muhammad's wives. By the way, Muhammad had 9 to 11 wives at one time.
Yeah.
And the one thing I'll leave off with Muhammad and his wives is Muhammad's second wife he married throughout his life, named Sauda, was starting to get old and ugly, and some hadiths narrated by Aisha say she was fat. So Muhammad was going to divorce Sauda because he didn't find her attractive anymore. So Sauda came up with a plan. She said, "Hey, Muhammad, if you don't divorce me and you still let me have a roof over my head and food on the table, you can have my night with you and give it to Aisha, your favorite wife." And Allah ended up praising Sauda for that. And Muhammad was like, "Sweet, I won't divorce you." So there is a part in the Quran that says that's perfectly okay for women to do. In fact, Allah praised Sauda for coming up with that scheme in the first place.
Right. Okay. Well, that was a lot. So I appreciate that you kind of studied the subject. So,
Yeah.
of course, there's a lot more we could discuss, but I think we've reached 35
Yeah.
minutes. So I think this should be it. But if there's,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, I appreciate what you do. Obviously, you're pretty new at the YouTube thing. I've been doing this, me personally, I've been doing this for a few years now, but I haven't really done any formal videos until much recently. So, I mean, it's all you just gotta take your time with that sort of stuff. Like me, I have to, I had to spend money to actually do the videos I do. So it's at first it could be kind of an issue, but we'll all get through it. Hopefully,
Yes, I mean, I just use my phone, and me starting out with Islam was just discussing with Muslims on live chats. So that's how I. So that's a big part of how I learned Islam. So anyone can, if you just learn some arguments for Islam against Islam, you don't need to learn all of them because that would be an entire career of apologetics.
yeah,
If you
right.
just learn just like 2, maybe 3 arguments against Islam. One I recommend is the Islamic dilemma, maybe, and then pick a few others depending on what you're interested in, and ask Muslims about that. And if you can't answer one of their questions, go back, study, talk with them again.
Right. Because yeah, you don't want to you don't have all the objections because then it'd be too much.
No.
But yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna end the stream, but it was nice talking to you, getting your perspective on things. And so for those watching, again, it's I left the link in the description, so just go check out his videos. He's still pretty new, but I mean, we all got to start somewhere, right? So it's nice talking to you.
I mean, that just means I have a new perspective. So definitely check out my channel.
Yeah. And we got a few other channels as well that are starting. So you're not the only one. There's a few others in the Youth Apologetics Empire that have just started their channels. One of them only has like 10 subscribers. So I mean, we're starting, but hopefully within a year or two from now, we'll all be pretty good in subscriber count and support. So we'll see how it goes. But
we'll be able to kick out people like David Wood and the others.
Right. We'll see. Anyways, I'm going to end the stream, but talk to you later.